Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. And what you're about to see is a pre-recorded training session we did over in the United States. But be assured that a lot of the material that we cover is really applicable to any automotive application. So just be aware that yes, it is a lot of North American vehicles, but they will apply a lot of the same principles apply over in the UK as well. Now, if you do have any questions, if you're watching this during the premiere, you can just leave it in the chat. We'll be monitoring live chat. If you're watching this after the premiere, then just feel free to leave a comment underneath the video and we'll get to those as we can as well. So my name is Jason Gabrenas. I'm one of Snap-on's diagnostic technical trainers. I've been in the training department since 2013, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep at Snap-on, so I had 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced, in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before I did that, it was 8 years at Subaru. So I worked in a dealership, and over time, I guess, just became the default diag guy in the shop. So I always ended up having the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my bed. Then before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today, this is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do, where we walk through a bunch of slides and then get to the tool. This is almost entirely live on the tool because we're going to show you some scan tool power user functions. So this is with Snap-on scan tools. We're going to walk through both the Windows-based and the non-Windows-based tools because a lot of them have the same functions, might just be a different button on the screen. So we're going to walk through that. A few different functions on here, help you tame the wild data that's out there, and a bunch of other things that we can do. So let's get right to it and let's get live on the tool. So let me first start with my Zeus here. So we're going to go through a few, we're going to kind of build up, I guess you could say. So first we have the idea vehicle. So we're going to go in here and we're just going to go into our demo vehicle for the first one. My tried and trusty and true Tahoe there. Okay, we'll load that. It's going to tell me it's in demo mode. Don't hook it to a real vehicle. And we'll come in here. Now, we talk a lot about intelligent diagnostics and how it can help us and all that, and pre-scans and post-scans and all those things. But as far as, well, what if I don't have a code? Well, what if I just want to go in here and I want to work through my data, right? So now there's a few ways we can do that. So let's go into engine. We're just going to go right into the engine system. And any of the modules will be the same as long as we can collect data through there. Then we're going to go into data. And this will load the full list of data. Now we see we have 5, 10, 15, 21 different categories of data, right? All the data out of this vehicle, 21 different lists. There's a lot of information coming at us, that information overload. So let's just go into engine data. That's the easiest one to go into. And we'll talk about a few things in here first. All right. So there's my full list. Now, a couple of years ago, in the tool, in the software, they added if you look on the top right-hand corner, it says Next Data Group. Now, I know that might be under my face, but there is a icon on the top right-hand corner that says Next Data Group. So if we look on the top left-hand corner, it says Engine Data. And then if we go to the right, it says Next Data Group. And then we'll see the top left changes. And it's going to cycle to the next group, which is misfire data. All right, so now I'm in misfire data. I can cycle to the next data group again on the top right-hand corner of the screen. And that brings me to my evap data and so on and so forth, right? So it allows us to cycle forward through each data group if I wish to do so. We could also back out, hit exit, and then choose whatever of these data categories we wanted to choose. So that's kind of a nice little thing that's in there. Hasn't been in there all that long, so I thought that was kind of interesting. So we'll go back into engine again. Now let's talk about, well, viewing data, right? So we're looking at numbers right now, right? So we see numbers going across the screen. Sometimes numbers can be hard to interpret, depending on how fast those numbers are changing. Might be hard to see, hard to tell what's going on. So maybe we might want to view it as a graph. A lot of folks prefer that. So I'll just open some graphs. On the Windows tools, it's just a little arrow on the left-hand side of the PID. We scroll up, we open our PIDs. Now, one trick when it comes to viewing data on these tools is whatever you want to see at the top, let's open that last, right? So see how it says fuel control loop status here? That's about middle of the way. If I click on that, it brings it up to the top, right? So whatever you open last as far as a graph will show at the top of the screen. So I'm going to open a few graphs here. We're going to show you another technique that we can talk about. That's good over there. We'll open up a few over here. Doesn't really matter which ones at this point. I'm just going to open a bunch. And you can see there's a lot of data in here to scroll through too. So it's a lot to look at. A lot going on. All right, so there's a bunch. Not sure how many I opened, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. On these tools, on these Windows-based tools, we can look at 3 per column, right? So 6 on the screen at a time. I can scroll through and look at additional data on either side if I wish to do so. But one kind of maybe like a hidden gem, I think, in this data stream is we can actually look at up to 16 PIDs on the screen at the same time. If we open up our graphs and go up to where it says graph view on the top in the center here, so you can see that where it says graph view. I click on that. I'm looking at 4, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15 out of 16. You'll see there's room for one more down here. So I have 15 graphs open on that other screen. That's how we can see that. So this is useful if I wanted to compare graphs, misfires, things of that nature where there's more than 6. Now, maybe on a V8, I wanted to look at my misfire counts, multiple oxygen sensors versus RPM or fuel trims as well, right? So I could have a short-term and long-term fuel trim on both sides, plus 4 or 5 oxygen sensors, depending on how the vehicle's equipped, and I'd be able to look at it all on the same screen there. Right, if we want to give it a little bit of a different view as well, we can turn off the scale, which turns off the vertical numbers, and then we can also turn off the sweep, which eliminates the horizontal numbers too. If you want to have a little bit more room in there with that view, we could save it from here. It's going to save the recording, or we can go back to our list view, which is on the top left-hand corner. And that brings us back to where we were with our 15 graphs still open. Now, if I wanted to close these graphs, simply click the arrow and it goes back to numbers, right? Pretty straightforward there. But that's kind of a neat little thing where you can look at up to 16 graphs. Now that's on a Windows tool. What about if I don't have a Windows-based tool? What if I have what we call SMX as the operating system on our other tools? So Solus, Modus, Apollo, Triton. Those tools, how would I do that? So let me switch over to, just forgot I closed my program there. Let that fire back up. Yeah. That's right there. There we go. Okay. There's my Triton. Okay, so I had to open a special program to show those on screen. So the Triton, we can do a lot of these things we just looked at, right? So we'll go to Scanner and load my demonstration vehicle again, just like we did on the Zeus. Load my Chevy demo. There we go. Okay. So we'll go into the engine data once again, and we'll load the data. Now we'll go to engine data. Now we're in engine data. Now usually it's gonna default to whatever you were looking at the last time. The very first time you open up the tool, it's going to default to numbers on the screen, just like we had on the Zeus there before. It's just numbers on a screen. Now, if I want to be able to advance my categories, my data categories, remember how we had that on the Zeus? We also have that right here on this little right arrow next to the house on the top left-hand corner of the screen. If I hit the right arrow, go from engine data, we see underneath, go from there, and it will go to the next category, which in this case is misfire data, and so on and so forth. It'll go to evap data, which it should right there, right? So it goes forward. Now, if I hit the back button, it's going to back me out to where I can just select any of my data lists. Right, so we'll go back to engine data again. Now, there is a way on these tools that we can look at up to 16 PIDs on the screen at the same time as well. On the tool itself, we really can't, right? If we go on the tool and we look like an 88 over a squiggly line there, that gives us our up to 4 graphs on a screen. And we can scroll. We can scroll through them so we can see what's going on if we wanted to see them all. But what if I want to be able to look at 16 like I did on my Zeus there? Well, in order to do that, first off, we have to go on the top right-hand corner of the screen and we have a little save icon there. I know maybe underneath my face, depending on how you're watching me, but if we hit the save icon, it's up on the top right-hand corner. It looks like a floppy disk. It's going to save that to the tool. And then we can go and pull this out of the data manager, and we'll see what it looks like. So cool function on the Apollo D9 and the Triton D10 is that it has this pull-out list that pops out that allows us to switch between different parts of the tool. So if I go to Tools and I go to Connect to my PC, this is how I'm going to view them using a free software that we have available called ShopStream-Connect. So I'm going to get that hooked up to my PC. Sometimes it takes a second depending on how my computer's feeling that day. Taking a little longer than it usually does, but that's okay. Let's see if it's showing up yet. No, it has not shown up yet. So my computer's not in a good mood today. Come over here and wait for it then. I love live programming. How about you? All right, I'm going to wait for that. I'm going to see how that goes. While we're doing that, while we're waiting for it to come up, I'm going to show you another thing that we can do with data along the lines of that custom data list we already talked about. So we talked about changing data lists. We talked about looking at 16 PIDs on a screen at once. Now let's talk about how we would customize this list. So custom data list. This is probably one of the more popular, one of the more familiar functions in the tools of what we're going to talk about today. But it is pretty useful as well. And it still is a lot of people out there that aren't aware of it. So if I'm on a Zeus or a Verus, I can go up to custom on the top left. And then it's going to list all of the PIDs in that category. And it's going to give me a way to deselect them all. So if I deselect all of them, that'll uncheck them. Then maybe I want to look at, let's say, engine speed and my oxygen sensors. So let's scroll wheel on that one. So oxygen sensors, and then my short-term and long-term fuel trim as well. Let's say I wanted to look at those things. Once I have them selected, I can either go to graph view and see them all as graphs like we just showed earlier, up to 16 on a screen. Or I can go over to list view and I can go through and I can change the data around as I need to as well. If I needed to shrink some of these down and just take a look at some numbers, we could do that just by doing it that way. All right, so that shrinks down the list. Now, another, I guess, fringe benefit you could say of that is that it gives us a way of speeding up data capture. Right now, many vehicles nowadays, they're processing that data really, really fast. So being able to speed up that data capture, instead of trying to capture 100 PIDs at a time, capture like 10, it's going to speed up the data capture rate as well, so we can see a better resolution movie as we're recording this, which, by the way, the tool is recording it automatically. You don't have to tell it to record or anything. It just, as soon as we're in here, it's going to start recording. If I do make a custom list, though, it's only going to record what's on the custom list. So just remember that as well. All right, so it looks like we're now in Connect to PC mode on the other side here. So let's get back to our 16 PIDs on the screen. So this is ShopStream-Connect. There's my tool right there. And we see I have multiple different files in here. So SCP is going to be scope recordings. XML will be pre and post scans. BMP is going to be any of our screenshots that we take with the tool. And then the last one up here, SCM, is going to be my scanner movie. So all I got to do is click on it once. It's going to give me the information down here at the bottom as to what vehicle and what it was captured on. Then if I double click, it's going to open up on my other screen. And then I can drag it over. There we go. You'll see across the top, we have 1, 2, 4, etc. Right? Different ways of viewing our data. We can go up to 16 PIDs on a screen at once. Now I could scroll through the data and it just looks at it in blocks of 16 at once. It just goes line by line. Right? So it can look at up to 16 on a screen at once. All right? Another cool thing we can do. From here, already the pre-recorded data, we could make a custom list. We can go in here and we can just choose different items to go in. We can edit the list. and we can undo, if I wanted to deselect them all and I only wanted to look at these things, can go back, and we can still do a custom data list after the fact. So if you want to record the whole data stream and then look at it just a selected number of PIDs, we could do that as well. I'm just going to go back to where we were, select all. Another cool thing we can do, we can click and drag in here. So if we look on the left-hand side, you see how it's kind of a gray box. These are the 16 PIDs we're looking at. What if I wanted to add an oxygen sensor to the mix here? So I can pull that up. We can drag it up, drop it, and then there's my oxygen sensor there. Now, what if I wanted to further up the list? What if I wanted it at the top of the list? I can do that. I can drag it all the way to the top. If I want to get this cold start out of there, bring it down to the bottom, and then whatever's next comes up. So we can drag and drop our 16 PIDs and put them wherever we'd like using ShopStream-Connect. Now, the one thing about using ShopStream-Connect with these non-Windows based tools is I can't do this while I'm hooked to the vehicle live, right? So I'm looking at a saved file after I already recorded it. So you just take your road test, drive the vehicle, hit the save button before you disconnect, and then you can take a look at it inside ShopStream-Connect on your own PC. Like I said, it's a free download. You just search Snap-on ShopStream-Connect on Google or what have you, or look at the Diagnostics website under downloads. Always available there. And you can view any of the files on the tool in that way. All right, so we'll close that and we'll get rid of that. And we are back on our Zeus. All right, so that is 16 PIDs either way. Then we talked about custom data list over here on the Zeus. There is another thing that we can do as far as custom data list is concerned. So if I come down, I'm going to change my vehicle on this one. So this one's got to use a different car. So I'm going to pull up this 2018 BMW. This is a cool little function that works on certain manufacturers. Not every manufacturer allows this on their vehicles. For some reason, that did my Tahoe again. That's true. So let's switch vehicles. There we go. That should work. There we go. 2018 BMW. So let's go into engine. It says sim mode's active. Oops, not codes data. I gotta go to data. Pull up the data stream and you'll see there's once again multiple data categories. So let's just go into factory data list in this case. See quite a few PIDs here, quite the lists. Could be a couple dozen PIDs in here. All right, we see a whole bunch. Could still do that next data group. That's available. If we go into custom data, though, it's going to look a little different. It's also going to take another second or two longer than normal because it looks different. Now you'll see I have all my data categories listed here, and I can select just a few PIDs from each category and make a list, a master list, I would say, across all of the different data categories in the computer. All right, so between all of these. So if I uncheck that, that's going to deselect them all. Let's say I want to see that one in this list, and then I'll go to here, and I want to look at that and that, okay? And then air supply data, that's a band from the 80s, right? So we'll look at that and that. And let's see, fuel delivery, I'll look at that one, and so on and so forth. You can go through. I'm not going to choose one out of everything. That's going to take too long. But you can see now that I have bold names on these, that means I have items out of each of those lists. So I can go back to the graph view, or I can go back to the list view, and that will give me my master custom data list, if you will, across multiple data categories. I can pull this together and bring this onto the tool all at once. So that's across, what, 4 different data groups. I was able to bring that up there. So that's kind of cool. Now that's available on, we found about 15 different vehicle or manufacturers that have that available. So that would include Acura, BMW, Chrysler, Dodge, Ford, Honda, Jeep, Lexus, Mazda, Mercedes, Nissan, Ram, Scion, Subaru, and Toyota. So all of those manufacturers have, not on every vehicle, but on the vehicles that support it, it does have this capability of being able to create this massive data list across multiple categories. So that's kind of a cool little function that they added a couple years ago. I haven't really talked all that much about it, I don't think. So I think it's just a cool, another cool little power user function in there. All right, next thing. Let's see, I'll pull that down, I think. There we go. Keep trying to click on the screen, right? Let's go into my demonstration vehicle again. This is back on my Triton. So Triton Apollo, Modus, Solus would have this functionality. So let's look how we would do custom data list on this tool, because it's a little bit different. Go back in Engine again, and we'll go to Data, and we'll just go to Engine Data. Custom data list on this, if I look on the top right hand, kind of in the middle, looks like a check mark. Click on that check mark. It's going to bring me to my full data list. Then if we go on the top far right hand corner, it looks like 2 check marks over no check marks. We click that, it deselects them all. Let's say I want to choose that one, that one, that one, and that one. Now, this is a change in the software. If you're used to maybe a couple of years ago, you'd be able to just hit the back button over here and it would save it. Now with this custom data list we're able to do, in order to do that, we need to have this check mark here, and the check mark tells the tool that we're saving it. So hit the check mark in the circle, and that'll save my list. And then I could just go, I keep trying to click on the screen. It's not a touch screen. There we go. And then there's my list of 4 items that I made previous. Okay. If I hit the back button, it's going to bring me out. If I make a custom list on a vehicle, it's going to save it right here as a custom list at the top of the menu as well. So if I've ever made a custom list on that vehicle, it's just a quick link that'll bring me back to that custom list. That way I don't have to worry about rebuilding the list. Maybe it's a common thing that I'm looking at on some of these vehicles. And of course, it's not going to cooperate with me, right? Okay, so that is, oh, hey, look at this. This is something cool. If you own one of our diagnostic tools, you may see these little messages pop up. So this is actually a perfect timing for this. So it says, you're invited to join our live online training classes. Learn how to get the most out of your Triton D10. So it's specific to this tool that I'm on. So if you go to snapon.com/OT, you can join my buddy Al, and he will walk you through how to use the tool better. So I think that's kind of cool. We get that little pop-up information on there. That's kind of cool how that happens. So I thought that was neat. All right, so let's go in and pull this BMW up that I had before. It's 3 Series sedan, 340i, sure. Okay, there we go. Engine. So this is going to show how we would create it across different lists. So if I go into data, and we'll go to that factory data list again, show you the difference. So here's my master list, right, of everything. If I go up on the top right, we go back to that custom data list, a little check mark inside the box, and then it pulls up our different categories once again, right? So we have that, uncheck all that. So let's say I want to choose this one. And then I'll go to this one and choose, let's see, maybe this and this. And then we'll go to this. That one, this one, that, this one, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and you'll notice on this tool, instead of just highlighting them or making them bold, it tells us how many in each category we have selected as well. So when I do that, once again, once I have my PID selected, go to my check mark on the top left-hand corner. It's going to save it for me. And then there's my slimmed down list that I have right there, right? So that is our custom data list and a custom data list. So let me exit this vehicle. Now let's go, since I'm already on this tool, we'll just go to the next thing on this tool. So that will be PID trigger. So I'm going to load my demo vehicle back up here. Doesn't like being in demo mode, I'll tell you that. Okay. Next function, we're going to talk about PID trigger. So PID trigger, that's been around for quite some time too, but once again, not a lot of people are aware that it's even there. So PID trigger is like a babysitter for your road test, right? So you'll take a PID, you mark a maximum and a minimum level. If it ever goes outside of that maximum or minimum level, it will throw a line through your data. So it'll tell you where it went outside, and it'll also throw a flag on there. It also saves it for you automatically, makes it a lot easier for you to find out where the problem was at the time. So let's look at these in graph view first. You don't have to, but it's easier. All right, so we'll say graph view here, and let's say I want to check my coolant temperature sensor, right? So I'll highlight the engine coolant temperature sensor there. And if I go to the top of the screen, looks like a squiggly line with a line above and a line below. That is my PID triggers. So I will go to that and set trigger. It's going to set trigger on your selected PID. So in this case, we have it down on the bottom of the screen. So I have an up and a down arrow and a check mark. So we're going to set the max at, well, let's pull it down one. So I'll pull it down to 160. So if it ever goes up past 160, it'll flag. I'll hit continue on the bottom right. It's going to save my top one. We can see where that gray line is. Now we see the red one on the bottom. I'm going to bring that down a little bit so it doesn't trigger when it's at the bottom. And then I'll hit continue. Then we see the two gray lines going across the PID here on the top. So I'm going to wait a second for that to draw past so it doesn't trigger right away. There's my max. See how it exceeded. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to that squiggly line, get arm triggers, and you see they turn like a pinkish purple color. I also have a blue flag on the left-hand side. That means the PID's being monitored, and I see my max and I see my minimum. If it ever goes outside of it, it's going to go like that. It's going to beep. And then we see a red line gets marked right there. That's the one that went out. Then there's a green line that corresponds with all the other PIDs on the screen, which allows us to know what happened with this PID versus all the other PIDs. You'll also notice it saved it for me automatically. So it goes a few more frames, and then it saves it and marks it with a gray line over here as to where it saved it, right? So that's like an automated road test, so to speak now. And if you use intelligent diagnostics of smart data, it does pretty much that, but automatically on certain PIDs. So this is the manual way to do it. You can still do that manual function either in the tool manually or in intelligent diagnostics. You can also set these levels manually. Now, what are the levels that you need to set them to? You're going to need to check with your manufacturer's information, because depending on the manufacturer, you don't necessarily know where that PID is supposed to be, but oftentimes you can find it with the manufacturer. Sometimes you just know from experience, but in some cases you might not. So that's where you find the data for that, the information for that. All right, so let me back out of that, and let's see how we would do that on our Zeus. All right, so let's see. I'm going to go in here. Let's see, mass airflow, max of 95. That's a little much. All right, I'm just going to change my vehicle. We'll just change the vehicle. That's easy. Scanner, pull out my Tahoe, which I can choose from the top menu. Makes it faster. Go in here under engine and data. Okay. So let's talk PID trigger. So we have the engine coolant temperature sensor. All right, that's not the one we looked at though. I think we looked at this one, right? IAT sensor, no, it's flat. Okay, so we will just look at this. Engine coolant temperature. Okay, there it is. There's the engine coolant temperature. Okay. So we see it goes up to the 159, 160. All right, so I want to set a PID trigger on this particular item. So I'm going to go up to where the dots are, and I'll hit setup, and that'll bring me to my setup menu. Say trigger on. Minimum of 0 in this case, and my max will be 160, just like I had it on the Triton. All right, so there's my trigger. Check off the box, type in the numbers, and then hit save. Once we've done so, it gives me my max and my minimum going through there, and it's going to just keep recording until we need to make a change here. So down the bottom left-hand corner, I have this camera icon that'll arm those triggers. So I'm going to hit arm, and it's going to arm them. And I have the little flag up here on the top telling me it's being monitored. Once it changes and once it exceeds that 161 degrees, it's going to set a line. Now this looks a lot different because I set the minimum at 0 and the minimum. There we go. There's my beep. All right, so it beeped and then it threw a red line through there. Now that red line will correspond with a gray line or on all the other PIDs, right? So I have other PIDs here, same thing, same situation, same time. I have a gray line on all of them, and that goes a few more frames and saves automatically. Does not denote where it saved it on the pattern, but it does give you the flag and the red line there. So that's PID trigger. Okay, so that's all scanner functionality, right? But these tools also have other functionality in them, don't they? They have guided component test meter. So on the tools that have guided component test meter, there's a couple other little, I would say, power user functionality as well. So I go into my tool. Before I ID a car, down the bottom, we have training and classes. We go into training and classes, we have some power user tests in here. So current probe tests, dual channel tests, secondary ignition tests, pressure transducer tests, right? So it gives us these different generalized tests for a vehicle. So if you're a bit more of a power user with the scope, you can go in here, select one of those tests: fuel pressure, exhaust back pressure, line and shift solenoid pressures, etc., fuel pressure versus current, and more, right? So that is available. There also is, inside how to, we go in here. There are also some classes in here that I think might be interesting. So for example, 10-minute running compression waveform class. I get questions on running compression waveforms all the time. Say, hey, how do we go through here? How do we read this? How do we see what's going on inside the cylinder? So I'm not going to read through this whole article for you, but if you can go in there, it's inside your tool already. If you have a tool with a guided component test, it's going to tell you how we would read through this this waveform right here. So an example, good waveform for a running compression test or running pressure test. Yeah, running compression waveform test. Okay, so that is my guided component test. And that, as I said, that's available in both of the tools. Now, one more thing, last thing we're going to show you. So this thing is only available on the Windows-based tools. So I'm going to pull up my Tahoe again. Go in here. And let's say I'm looking at data. I'm looking at data and I want to know, is this correct? Is the data correct? Is what's going on with the vehicle, or at least in the computer, accurate as to what's going on inside the component that I think is a problem? So let's say I'm going to look through here and try and find a voltage here. So let's see. They always hide it on me here. Okay. So let's go to, let's say, fuel level sensor. Let's say I have a problem with a fuel level sensor on a vehicle, right? And I want to be able to test where the problem is. So in this case, I see 0 volts on a fuel level sensor. Now, let's say that's not supposed to happen. With the key on, minimum fuel level sensor should be more than 0 volts. But let's test that fuel level sensor, because we don't want to just assume, well, the fuel level sensor must be bad just because the PID says so. Because there could be a break somewhere between that sensor and that computer, anywhere in that line. We've seen it before. So in this case, I'm looking at the data PID and I see fuel level sensor volts, it's flatline, right? So that means I have a problem. So next thing I would do is go into guided component tests. And I'm going to pull up my vehicle. Passes most of that through. Demonstration vehicle is a little limited on the test, but at least we can see what's in here. So there are my different components there. And in this case, I want to go to my evap system. And not my evap system, my fuel system, sorry. Fuel system, there we go. And then we have a fuel level sensor there. And then we have a component information and we have a resistance test. So in this case, we could measure resistance at the connector and see what's going on. So we get a fuel level signal, which is our purple wire. Ignition positive, ground, and PCM ground, right? So that's available there on the sensor. So that's there's a primary sender and a secondary sender as well. So it gives us both connectors and both pinouts, right? So there's a resistor in there, and it's variable resistor as it goes As it goes down, the voltage will change, the resistance will change. Now, in this case, we have a resistance test, so I need to find something with voltage, right? So my fuel pump have voltage. Now it's got current ramp. Let's go to my fuel injector. That has voltage. All right, so I can go in here and I can check my, let's say, signature test. If I hit my meter, it's going to set my voltage where it needs to be, and it sets the time where it needs to be for the component. In this case, we're looking at a fuel injector there, but we can see 12 volts going across the screen down here. So I would want to see some sort of voltage going out of that fuel level sensor. Now, what if I saw 0 volts like this? If I'm testing at the sensor and I do see 0 volts, then I can feel pretty confident that that sensor is not outputting the voltage it needs, as long as I'm testing the input and it's getting voltage in. So if I'm getting voltage in and no voltage out, that indicates we have a problem at the sensor. Now, in this case, my wire is a little loose in there. So what you would see is, let's say I have 12 volts like this, and let's say 12 volts is where it needs to be. Usually it's about 5 volts, but for the sake of argument, we'll just say it's 12 volts. So we'll go in here in 12 volts, and that's coming out of the sensor. If I see 12 volts at the sensor and 0 volts at the computer, that means that voltage is not making it back to the computer, so we need to figure out where the problem is. Now, oftentimes, they put those fuel level sensors while they're on top of the tank, right? And oftentimes they're maybe underneath the seat, depending on the vehicle. So in that case, good place for a mouse nest, right? I've seen it many times, especially up in New England here. You get a lot of mouse nests in there, and a lot of manufacturers are insulating their wires in a soy-based insulation. So I would imagine that's probably pretty delicious for your local neighborhood field mouse. So they go in there and they chow down and they eat up the wires. And that's why we could have some sort of a problem. So in this case, I want to be able to see the difference though. So from here, when I have my meter up, I can hit meter once, makes it full screen. Meter twice, brings it down to a window. Since it's a Windows-based tool, we can have multiple windows open. Go to the home screen, go to the scanner, and see my sensor there. I can pull up my scope there, can drag it to one side, I can drag it to the other side. I can see what's going on at the sensor, and I can see what's going on at the computer and see if they match. They should be pretty darn close. If I got 12 volts here and I have no volts there, it's open. I have a problem somewhere. So we can see if they match. So that's pretty cool, being able to see at the sensor and then the received voltage in the computer and make sure the signal's getting there. What if we wanted to take that one more step further? So let's say I wanted to test something. In this case, let's test the evap solenoid. So I'm going to functional test. That is an output control. And we'll go way down to the vent solenoid. Okay. So a vent solenoid allows fresh air to come into the evap system, either to purge the canister or to allow us to fill up the fuel tank, allows fresh air to go out that way. And in this case, it's a simple on-off solenoid. I can set it to either open or closed, venting or not venting. So if I hit venting, I should see a voltage result over here. If I set it to not venting, let's say it goes to that when it's set to not venting, normally ground. And then when I set it to venting again, it goes back up. And of course, like I said, my switch is a little messed up. But then if I set it to venting, it goes back up. So I can perform a functional test on one side and then see the result of the functional test on that side. So if I want to open or close, percentages, maybe on a purge solenoid, something of that nature, I can see the result over here. So since it's wirelessly connected to the car, I can be functioning through on the left and then seeing the result on the right. So cause and effect type diagnosis. So all on one screen. So I can really have anything on one side, anything on the other side, since it is a Windows-based tool that allows me to have those multiple windows open. I could even have my repair information on the screen as well, right? So it gives us all these options of multiple things we could see on the screen. All right, so that is my time. And with that, that is our time here today. So make sure you tune in for new diagnostic content every week. We will be premiering a new video every Wednesday at 7 p.m. UK time. So make sure you check it out on the YouTube channel. If you're watching, well, of course, you would be watching this on YouTube, but make sure you subscribe, thumbs up, ring the little notification bell so you know anytime we post new content. And it's youtube.com/SnapOnDiagnosticsUK. With that, time for questions. If you have any questions, just feel free. Once again, if you're watching this on a Premiere, just leave it in the live chat and we'll answer those. Otherwise, leave a comment under the video and we will get to those as we monitor those comments as well. So I'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to learning a little bit more about how you might be able to be more efficient at diagnosing vehicles using some of the information that we've given you today. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Hopefully, you can watch and see you on any of our other videos. Have a good week, have a good night, and take care.